In the beginning of Parshas Shemos, the Torah says, what do you mean, Lo Yada Es Yosef? Like I didn't know who was the president of the United States the last 4 years. He knew who Yosef was. He didn't care. He didn't have a sense of Hakoras HaTov. So because Lo Yodas, the Medrash says, the same Lashon appears because Lo Yodas Yosef, because he lacked Hakoras HaTov, that's why he says later on, Lo Yadaiti Es Hashem. Chavis Alvavos writes like that Hakoras HaTov, we consider one of the most important leaders because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is invisible. You can easily forget about him. So if you have ingrained in you the sense of HaKadosh HaTov, people realize that they have what to be indebted to HaKadosh Baruch Hu over the fact that that he brought us into the world and that we're functioning, we're still alive and we're healthy. To whatever extent we're healthy, so we have to have HaKadosh HaTov. So this will be mechazik, the belief, the emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When I was the Talmud in the yeshiva, the mashgiach was Rav Lesson. So he would always say over, very often he would say over the medrash on the pasuk on the door hafloga. It says, Hashem liris esambigdal shabono b'nei ha'adam. So Rashi quotes from the medrash Rabbah. What do you mean shabono b'nei ha'adam? What's the alternative? B'nei hachamorim? Of course, shabono b'nei ha'adam. It should just say shabono. It's obviously talking about people. So the Rashi quotes the Medrash. Bnei Hoda means the descendants of Adam Arishon. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu was kind to Adam Arishon. He gave him a wife. He created Chava lo tov heyosu Adam levado eselo izik kenegdoi. And then when he sinned by eating from the Eitz Hadas, so he pins the blame on the Rebbe Shalom. He says, the witch, you gave me a witch for a wife, and that's the way I sinned. It's your fault. Instead of having Hakoras HaTov for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says it's your fault that you gave me this witch of a wife. So that's what the Medrash says. Because Adam Arishon was a Kafei Taiva, that's why his descendants later on carried over that trait, and they were prepared to build a Migdal V'Rosha B'Shamayim and to rebel against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That Hakoras HaTov will lead a person to maintain the emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The pasuk describes the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu. So it says, "Vayelechish mibeis Levi, vayikach es bas Levi." What does it mean, Vayelechish mibeis Levi? Should say, "Vayikechish mibeis Levi, Isha mibeis Levi." What's Vayelech? So the Ibn Ezra says he went on a date. That Amram lived on one side of the town, and Yocheved lived on the other side. So he had to go date the girl. So the Ramban picks up on that. Is that really so important to write that he dated her, that she lived on the other side of the town? So I think perhaps the answer is, there's Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchever has a Sefer Chumash, Kedushas Levi. So he raises a question, how come the Chumash describes the Shidduch of Yitzchak? Eliezer went to get a wife, and Shidduch of Yaakov Avinu, Shidduch of Moshe Rabbeinu. How come it doesn't describe the Shidduch of Avraham Avinu? So he says Avraham Avinu was a Nachri. He probably met his wife at a New Year's party. It's not worthy of being described in the Chumash. Chumash doesn't write biography. Chumash writes that part of the biography that's relevant to us. So the Shidduch of Avraham Avinu, he was a Nachri. It wasn't the Jewish Shidduch, wasn't worthy of being described in Tanakh. So here the pasuk is Vayelechish mibeis Levi. The dates were Torah dates. The way the Ibn Ezra learns that he went from one side of the town to the other to date her, that's a mila. That's when a boy gets married. It was a Torah date. I remember I was once at a wedding. I came a little late to the wedding, so I wasn't going to get a kibbutz anyway. I went to the wedding. Someone from NCSY got married. So I'm sitting next to a non-Jew who was sitting next to, I forgot his name, one who used to run the whole NCSY. So at the end of the wedding, the groom didn't kiss the bride. So the guy sitting next to me says, what kind of wedding is this? He didn't kiss the groom. He didn't kiss the bride. So the rabbi who runs NCSY said not only didn't he kiss the bride now, he didn't touch the girl all the times that they were dating. So he said, what kind of dating is that? So he says he wrote a whole book about the love and marriage the Jewish way. is to run the NCSY. It's a different kind of dating. It's a different kind of marriage. Then the pasuk says that Basya Baspara, doesn't say her name, Baspara went lirchotz al ya'ar, and she saw a baby, and she figured it must be a Jewish baby, and the baby was crying because he was hungry. So they tried, so the missing, part of the story is missing. Rashi fills it in from the Gemara and Saita, that should I go get Isha Menekes Minhu Ivriyo, should I get a Jewish mother to nurse the baby? So Baspara said yes. And then Miriam took her mother, the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, she nursed the baby. So the Medrash says that she tried to get Noshim Mitzrayos to nurse the baby, and it didn't work. So she said, should I get a Jewish mom? He said, yeah, that worked. Why didn't it work? So the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch quotes this Medrash, the halacha, that if a Jewish mother is not well and she's unable to nurse her baby, you have to get someone else to nurse the baby. It's preferable to get a Jewish woman who eats kosher food. And if you have to have a non-Jewish woman who eats non-kosher food, you should try to convince her that during the period of time she's nursing the baby, she shouldn't eat non-kosher food. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to nurse from the Noshim HaMitzvahs because they ate non-kosher food. And a Pesha also, the Dabarim Hashchina, he was going to become a big Navi. It's not really proper that he should drink milk. The milk from a Jewish woman, milk from a non-Jewish woman, al pi din, it's the same milk. But the milk from the non-Jewish woman comes from the fact that she ate a non-kosher food. So a child is going to turn out to be a Navi. It's best that he shouldn't even, as a baby, he shouldn't even have to eat food that came from non-kosher sources. So what does that have to do with us? Why should we be careful? So Rabbi Yachin Kamenetsky writes in his Sefer Chumash, we should try to be machanech our children for the maximum. We shouldn't settle for the least. Maybe our children will become big tzaddikim, big neviim like Moshe Rabbeinu. So maybe our child will be zeichet to be a pesha, so the dabar mashchina. So we don't want to have that he should have to eat some food that's kosher, but it came from non-kosher food. We're eating non-kosher food. Moshe Feinstein has in his chuvas about pills. What's the story with the pills? So he said basically all the treifah pills are kosher. There's nifsa b'achila sodom. If you, let's say, at a wedding, how do you know whether something nifsa b'achila sodom? You don't tell the people what it is. Let's say you put it at a wedding on a table. You see if anybody will eat it. So the first person will eat it to say this doesn't taste good. And tell all the other people don't eat it. It's not right l'achila sodom. So basically, all the pills, all the treifah pills are really kosher, all nefsa machilosad. Moshe says, but if you can get kosher pills, and it's not that much more expensive than the non-kosher pills, he recommends you should do that. Why? It's nefsa machilos, so what's the problem? Because it started off as non-kosher food. So that's the midas chasidus over here. You should try to avoid, unless it's going to cost a fortune of money, then you follow the ikar adin. The ikar adin is that all the pills, most of the pills are not royal achila. They have no flavoring in them. Tastes awful. So ikar adin it's all mutter, but if it originates in non-kosher food, so that constitutes a midas chasidus, not to eat it. Then, when Moshe Rabbeinu became a little mature, he was told that he's from the Jewish people. So Rashi quotes from the matter, he looked into the future with Ruach HaKodesh and he saw Einish, no tzaddikim will be born for this Mitzri. So he killed the Mitzri because he was starting up with the Jewish person. So that's taka the din. Let's say someone is over the Zor Mechal Shabbos and he deserves a death penalty. So you have to look into the future with Ruach HaKodesh to see if he's going to give birth. A grandchild, a great-grandchild is going to be a tzaddik. So then you don't kill him. There is no such a din. So I think they quote from Rav Dobala Soloveitchik that the next day, when he saw two Jewish people who are fighting with each other, two Jewish people who are fighting, so he says back, what do you mean, that's when you plan to kill me. So Rashi quotes from the Medrash, he didn't kill him with by stabbing him or shooting him. He killed him with just saying this. It was like a misa b'dei shamayim. This person should die. So this is like a misa b'dei shamayim. So when it comes to misa b'dei shamayim, then you only give that death penalty. The nocher machayiv misa for the sheva mitzvahs ben erech. Like Gemara says, azaros azulim misasai. Whenever a nocher violates any of the sheva mitzvahs, even if he violates gezel pachas mishavar puta, the Gemara says ben erech is nerag al pachas mishavar puta. That is chayiv misa. So Bezdin should give him the death penalty, but over here, that Nochi was lifting up his hand, he was going to harm the Jewish person. For that, he's not chayiv misas Bezdin, only chayiv misa b'dei shamayim. So misa b'dei shamayim, that's a calculation. If it's going to be l'hargedi ato omer, you're going to kill him by mentioning Shem Hashem. That's misa b'dei shamayim. So that if it would appear through Ruach HaKodesh, if you can be mavara, that some decent descendants are going to be born to that person, and you don't give them the Misa B'dei Shamayim. Misa Bezdin, you do give it, you don't give the Misa B'dei Shamayim. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to run away because Paro heard, Vayishma Paras Adova Vakish La'arogas Moshe, so Moshe Rabbeinu runs away, and then he sees that the Benois Koy Midian had a whole bunch of daughters, and they went to take care of the sheep. He didn't have any sons, he only had daughters, so they had to take care of the sheep. So they come back, their father asked how come he came back so early today, usually he came back later. So they said, Ish Mitzri Hitzilonam Yad Haroy. They called him an Ish Mitzri, and when he found out later, that's what he said, he didn't object to that. So that's what the Medrash has an interesting comment, that when Yosef was purchased and he was brought down to Mitzrayim, they said, they called him an Ish Ivri. So he was happy about that. They referred to him as the man from Eretz Yisrael. And when Moshe Rabbeinu was referred to as the Ish Mitzri, he should have corrected them. He should have said, I'm not a Mitzri, I'm Jewish. So because he didn't stick up for the fact that he was from Eretz Yisrael, that's why he wasn't zecher to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. What does that mean? The Psukim and the Chumash say why he didn't cross over the Yarden, why he wasn't buried. It's an additional time, because Yosef hoide be'artzai, and Moshe lo hoide, Moshe Rabbeinu lo hoide be'artzai. So that's why he wasn't zecher to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. It's an interesting comment. So then when Koy Midian heard that that's what happened, so he said, why don't you invite him and give him some food? So the Medrash has a comment, Yochalechem means Shem Yisa Achas Mehem. Maybe he'll marry one of his daughters. Like it says by Yosef, that Potiphar didn't know anything, Ki Malech Mashuhu Achel, mean he only had, the only thing that he had for himself was his wife. Everything else Yosef was taken care of. So to over here, the Yochalecha means he should marry one of them. So that's what the Chazal made a Gzeira against Bishal Akum and Pasakum and Stam Yena because of B'nai that the way to the man's heart is through his stomach. That's the American expression. If you give him food, then the Shema Yisa Achas Mikem. That's why the Chachamim made the Gzeres of Bishal Akum and Pasakum and so on. So the Pasuk continues to say that Moshe Rabbeinu was a shepherd for his father-in-law, Yisro Chosem Moshe, and he comes to Har Elokim, Har Chorev, and he says the snare is burning and it doesn't get consumed. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls out to him Moshe, Moshe. So the Nefesh HaChaim, B'Rab Chaim Volozhin, it quotes a line from the Zohar, that when it says Moshe, Moshe, in the Chumash, we don't have a bar separating between the first one and the second one. Abraham, V'yom Hineni, there's a psik b'gavei, that you pause in between. And Yaakov also, there's a psik begabe. By Moshe and Moshe, there's no psik begabe. So the Nefesh HaChaim explains what is that Zohar driving at. That every person has in heaven, they have a file cabinet with a list of all the people in the world and what their potential, what their maximum potential is. So if you look at in the file cabinet, it has Avram Avinu has all the tzaddikim, has the tzaddikim, the Rishonim. So the person in real life never really lives up to his maximum potential. So that's the bar in between Abraham and Yaakov. The first one, the first mentioning of the name stands for what his potential was. Second one stands for what he actually was. And they didn't live up to their maximum potential. Moshe Rabbeinu, there's no psik begavei. He fulfilled his maximum potential. That's why Moshe, there's no pause in between. It's exactly the same. That's what I think the Radak says. There's a din by an Ebed Kanaini, Kol Masha Kana Ebed Kana Rabbo, and it says Moshe Abdi Meis in the beginning of Sefer Yeshua. Moshe Abdi Meis, why is it called an Ebed? Because everything that he had, he gave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kol Masha Kana Ebed Kana Rabbo. That's what Rashi and Chumash quotes from a different Medrash on the post. So Moshe min ha'or el ha'am. He didn't take care of his own things. He only took care of what the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted him to do. He used his potential to the maximum. So that's why there's no psik b'gavei. And Shulchan Aruch, they quote that there was Rabbi Yosef Kar mentioned somebody by name. I don't know who it is. Some rabbi who gave a sermon, and he interpreted the pasuk over here. Means you're going to be Maimon Hasina here. So this rabbi held the sermon. He interpreted, you'll worship the Egel ala Harazeh. So they told him that's ridiculous. That's what it means in the pasuk. He gave it as a drasha. So he said, you're not allowed to say that. I think they put him in Cherem or something for this stupid drasha. Can't just say any stupid sermon. Has to make sense. The Rambam quotes the Gemara in Shavuos that there are 7 names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shiva Shem Shein in the Mechakim. You're not allowed to erase Shem Hashem. So if it says Chana V'Racham Merach Apayim Rab Chesed, that's a description of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's not his name. But Yud Kei Vavka and Aleph Dalin and Yud, that's then proper names, nouns. Proper noun, a name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Rambam lists off also, it's Gemara, Eke, Asher Eke. This is also one of the Zayin Shemis, Shein and Nimchokim. So we usually assume that just like you're not allowed to be Mochek Shem Hashem, because the Pasuk says in Chumash Dvarim, when we come to Eretz Yisrael, we'll see all the Abdi Avodah Zarah. So it says, V'yibartem es matzei v'osam, Asher em tesu from Boesh, Psil elhem tegadeon, V'yibartem eshmam min ha'makom. You should erase the name of Avodah Zarah. Then it says, "V'sasim kein l'shem alakech," because you're not allowed to destroy asar noitet sevim min hamizbeach. So we should destroy the mizbechas of the Avodah Zarah. V'sasim kein l'shem. You shouldn't destroy noitet sevim min hamizbeach, and you shouldn't erase Shem Hashem. So there's 7 names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So here there's a discussion. The Bir Agra and Yeredeya and Hilchos Sefer Torah, the third chelik, where they list off and they Rambam. The Zayin Shem Shein Nimchokim. So there's a discussion. Eke Asher Eke. The first time and the second time. The first Eke, the second Eke, they're both Shem Shein Nimchokim. Maybe only one of them. Maybe the other one is not. So that's a discussion. Then the Meshech Chochmah has an interesting discussion that when the Chazan begins Musaf on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, he says a tefillah hin and neohani mimas. So he pronounces Eke Asher Eke as the Shem Hashem. So is it really necessary to pronounce the Shem? So some misunderstood. Rabbi Yosef Kar wrote a sefer, the Magad Nishar. He had a malach who used to teach him Sodis and Kabbalah and Halach also. The malach appeared to him and gave him both Kabbalah and Halach. So he raised the question with the malach, how come it's permissible to pronounce the Shem Eke? So the malach gave him an explanation why it's permissible. So many misunderstood, that's what the Meshech Chochmah writes, many misunderstood what the Magid was telling the Beis Yosef. They thought, even though you're not up pronounce Shin Dalad Yud and Aleph Dalad Nun Yud unnecessarily, but the name Ek Asher Eke, that doesn't count. That you're allowed to say whenever you want. So the Meshul Chochman says, no, that's not what it means. The Havamina of the question that Rabbi Yosef Kara asked the Magid was that Eke Asher Eke should be like Yud Kei Vot Kei, that you're not allowed to pronounce it at all. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, Zeh Shmi Li Olam, Zeh Zechile Dor Dor, that the Shem Hashem is Yud Kei Vot Kei, but you're not allowed to pronounce it. Olam is written, Olam should have been written with a Vav, Ayin Vav Lamed Hey. It's written without a Vav, and it was dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu, Malnei Chaser. Every word of the Chumash was dictated, word for word, letter for letter. So how come it's missing a Vav? Because we darshan it as if it were written La'alim, La'alam. You pronounce it Le'olam, but it means La'alim. The Gemara says that in the Beis HaMikdash, Chomok Moshe Asker Shmi Avalecha Ve'erachticha. Beis HaMikdash, they permitted to pronounce the Shem Hashem, because that's the makar of all the bracha. Chomok Moshe Avarcha Avalecha Ve'erachticha. And the Beis HaMikdash was the makar of all brachas. Then you're permitted to pronounce Shem Hashem. Outside of the Beis HaMikdash, you're not allowed to. So that was the question that the Beis Yosef asked the Magid. Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to pronounce Eke Asher Eke at all. Even when you're learning Kriyas HaTorah, it should be like Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the Malach answered, no, it's the same as Aleph Daled Nun Yud. You're allowed to pronounce it if you're reading the Torah. It's not like Yud Kei Vav Kei. But it doesn't mean that you're allowed to pronounce it unnecessarily. Just like there's an Iser, Motzi Shem Shemaim Levatola, and Elokim, and Kel, and so on. The other Shem, so too there's an Iser, Motzi Shem Shemaim Levatola, and Eke Asher Eke as well. The Gemara says that when the Kohanim and the Beis HaMikdash were duchen, those who knew the correct pronunciation of Yud Kei Vav Kei would pronounce it, but you're supposed to keep it a secret, Laha'alim. So the others, people who would be there, would sing a niggun and drown out the voice of those Kohanim who knew the correct pronunciation. So nobody heard it. So that's what the Gemara describes. So that's the question. Now, how would the Kohanim, Yotzei, Nesias Kapayim, supposed to say that Yirech Hashem Yishmerecha loud enough that all the people in the shul can hear? You don't have to scream on top of your lungs. It depends. If the shul is crowded all the way to the back, so the Kohanim have to speak loud enough that the people in the back row can hear. If everybody's in the front row, they can whisper. Kol Ram just means loud enough that everybody should be able to hear. but if you have other people drowning out their voices, singing a niggun, Mavliya B'neimim, so how would they say Bichas Kohanim? I don't know. The Chumash describes the way Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Paro, and he says let us go for 3 days to worship our God. We want to bring korbanos. Why did he tell them Allah for 3 days? He meant they're going to go for good. And then they borrow Shalish and Mishchentem and Doras Besa. They should borrow things. What do you mean borrow? They didn't plan to give it back. Why did they have to fool them? So in my father's time, my father went here to Yeshiva College, Moshe Salvation. So there was a professor who taught Tanakh. His name was Professor Klotz. That was his name. So they printed, they didn't have a Beis Yitzchak then. They used to have Heidenu, our echo. And when Dr. Revel passed away, then they called it Eidenu, the day of our tragedy. Aleph Yudud, Yom Edom, Eidenu. So in Heidenu, this Professor Klotz, my father had 1 or 2 Heidenus at home. So Professor Klotz spoke about that. So he said that the archaeologists discovered that at the time that Bnei Yisrael were in Mitzrayim, at that time, the law of the land was that an Eved is not allowed to serve any religion. And if you ask Paro, we want to go for 3 days to worship our God, that means, in other words, you should free us. That's what it means. Even though it's only for 3 days, it means it's a nice way of saying, could you please let us go free? So that wasn't a lie. That means let us go free. And then why does it have Shalish and Mishchentem and Doras Besa? I remember Rabbi Soloveitchik once said over in the name of Rabbi Hershel, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. We should look it up in his commentary. At that time, the commentary, only people who knew German would read it. It wasn't common here in America they didn't have translations. Somebody, some descendant of Rabbi Hirsch, his name was Levi, I think he was a dentist in London. He wrote in England. They had the English translation, but now they have Hebrew and Yiddish and everything. So Rabbeinu Hirsch says on the pasuk, "V'shalisha, ki shalish me'im reyehu," means to borrow. Shalisha me'eis reyehu, me'eis rusa, means to ask for a present. V'shal me'im means to borrow. So nothing was a lie over here. The Sheila was never intended in the first place to be a borrowing, to give it back. Rashi points out from the Medrash here that it doesn't quote the whole Medrash, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to Moshe Rabbeinu in the burning bush, and that for 7 days, and every day he tells him, I want you to be the shliach to do the geula, and Moshe Rabbeinu every day argues a different argument. The 7 days gave 7 different excuses why he doesn't want to go. So one day, the first day he says, I'm not worthy. Then he says the second day, they're not going to believe me. Then he says that Bnei Yisrael are not worthy, a third time. And then he says, Hasagas Gvula, my brother, my older brother Aaron is an Avi, and it'll be Hasagas Gvula. Every day had a different item. And after 7 days, the Rebbe Shalom said, enough. I wanted you to go do the Gula. I'm going to punish you. Why you keep on refusing? And he says, how Aaron, the taina was that it's going to be Hasagas Gvul. And Aaron said, Yicharaf Hashem and Moshe. What do you keep on refusing? He won't be upset. Hasagas Gvul is if the other person feels hurt. He won't feel hurt. He'll be very happy that you are going to do the Geula. What is it? Aaron Achicha Halevi. So Rashi quotes from the Medrash that was the punishment. The original plan was that Moshe Rabbeinu was going to be the Kohen and Aaron is going to be a Levi, and not because he keep on refusing. You're not accepting the shlichus, so I'm going to punish you. And you're not going to be the Kohen. Aaron will be the Kohen, and you'll be a Levi. So that's what the Meshul Chochmah raises a question that in next week's Sedra, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu again, he should go speak to Paro. But again, Moshe Rabbeinu argues. How does he argue again? He argues, that's one of the times it has now. Again, he says the same thing. He was punished already in Parshas Shemos. How come over here he's not punished? How come he does again the same over? So the Meshul Chochmah explains that the Chazal have a comment. It says right after that, Eli Rasha Beis Havosim B'nei Ruvain, B'nei Shimon, Eli Shmos B'nei Levi, and so on. So Rashi quotes a part of the Medrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to write the yichus of Aaron and Moshe because you're appointing a person to be Mamuna ala Tzibur, has to be Min HaMuvcha. Some Tosim Malach HaMelech, what does it say? Some Tosim, Kol Masim B'Masha. Any appointment over the community should be Min HaMuvcharim. Ikerev Achecha Tov Tzilach HaMelech. So the Pasuk says the yichus of Moshe and Aaron, so Mitoch Shehutzach Leyachas Moshe and Aaron, they say that they were appointed to a position of Svara. They had a proper yichus. So then it starts over with Reuven, Shimon, and it ends with Levi. But why do you have to say what the yichus of Moshe Rabbeinu is? It already says what the yichus is. So he says, no, because they were Vayitzavim al Bnei Yisrael, it says here. In next week's Sedra, it says Vayitzavim means he appointed them to an official position of leadership over Bnei Yisrael. And Parshas Shemos, he just tells them, go to deliver a shlichus. Go to Para and deliver a shlichus. That's not a minoi, that's not a srora. So then he's not allowed to refuse. But over here, where it's an appointment, it's a srora, so then you have to write that he's from the miyuchosim, because of the pasuk. Some tosim kol mesim is b'mashma, v'ker b'achechem means b'muvcha sheb'achechem. So that's why he wasn't punished. That was derech eretz dictates like that. The Gemara says when the Gabbai calls someone up for an aliyah, so if a person, he's insulted, it's a bizoyim to get chamisha. People have a bug in their head. What's shishi and shlishi, whatever. Certain aliyahs they consider more important than others. So they don't want to take an aliyah because it's a bizoyim to them. Should have given a fatter aliyah, a better aliyah. So the Gemara says one who refuses to take an aliyah is going to be punished. So the only time it's proper to refuse to turn down the gabbai if they call you to be chosan Torah, a chosan bereishis, because the Gemara says that's a big covet, that's a big yichas. Shmona psuk Shabbat Torah yochid kariyasim yochad and yuchad to be the Chasan Torah, the last aliyah. That's Shmona psuk Shabbat Torah. So you call up the yochad ham yuchad. That's what some Rishonim interpret. So that's a position of covered, position of svara with a tzibur. So that's why Derech Eretz dictates you should refuse it. But it says, let's say the Gabbai asks you, could you please daven for an omen? So to be the shliach tzibur is also a svara. You only have to represent the whole tzibur as a svara. So the Gemara says you should refuse the Derech Eretz dictates. You should refuse the first time, and then the second time you should refuse a little bit, but you should start getting ready to go. Then the Gabbai asks you a third time, then you should go. So that's what Rav Soloveitchik pointed out. When you call out Rishus, before you call up the Aliyah for Chasan Torah, Chasan Mereshit, you say 3 times, Amod, Amod, Amod. Why do you say 3 times? Because that's a position of Svara. The Derech Eretz would dictate that you should refuse the first 2 times. That's why we say 3 times, Amod, Amod, Amod. So you shouldn't be able to refuse. Okay, a good Shabbos, everyone.